nonprofit organizations and community groups. Let's speak to that.
Again, I think that the framework is creating jobs for people in our community, and that's not a bad thing. The bad thing is that they've superseded the grassroots levels of our community, and the question is how do we reverse that? Where the grassroots are now serving the nonprofits versus the nonprofits serving the grassroots, and the problem is, I remember brother named Bokiba. Older brother,
the OG.
Definitely OG, right?
Yeah.
And he was telling me like when Coleman Young got elected, first thing he did was he hired all the street organizers. In the grand scheme of things, it looked good, but there was no one to replace the street organizers. And the same thing in these nonprofit organizations, they're snatching our boldest and our brightest up. And the dynamic is that we have not created economic opportunities to create jobs for them. For them to remain in the position that they are, and then where we're not losing all of them in them, but then two, we're not creating enough spaces to have conversation because there's no unified design plan how to go into, because we all agree that it's the nonprofit industrial complex, correct?
And with that, I have a question for you, because you work with the Michigan Roundtable, right. But in that role, it's more like the term is intrapreneur, but you're more of a social entrepreneur. Right. So how did you have the courage to negotiate a relationship where your work becomes a part of your work? Because usually it's like, okay, I got this job, so I got to stop all of the community projects that I've been doing, and they have me because I'm doing one community project. We may do one dinner a year. They may pick up one program. Right. It's so interrelated. Like, how did you have that courage? How did you speak that for the young brother watching? I'm assuming it's going to be a lot of young brothers and sisters that are looking for something like that. That, you know, because we meet some of the enthusiastic young people that are like, how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? And if they end up in that position working with an organization, how do they keep doing their work for their community on their purpose, but also align with an organization where they're working symbiotically?
So the coldest game I ever got was from an OG in Milwaukee. And he said, "Young blood, don't negotiate your fears. Negotiate your self-worth. I mean your worth." And a lot of times we going in places negotiating our fears, not our worth.
Explain.
I mean, we're too busy worried about whether they're going to accept us. You know, we're overthinking. Shall I look this way? And when he said that, because for me, there was no entry point. And I think for a lot of us, we just had to figure this shit out. And so as you figure it out, you're making mistakes, but you're always questioning yourself because there's someone's always over you, or you feel like someone, because the reality, we're infiltrating or coming more into a white hegemony space, however that may look. And so as a result, again, the road to get in there has been cleared. It has not been connected to the dots of how to follow the next person. So in understanding that, but then fortunate when I was recruited, so it's two phenomena. My coworker at the time, Stacy, I did a lot of some of the work of clearing some of the pathway, but also again coming in, and Stacy's a white woman who overstood some of the dynamics and challenging within the organization. So when we coming in, knowing what I brought, and I've been doing this, I've been working for myself for almost 10 years. So I'm not about to relinquish anything, but also I was a missing link to the organization. So again, if I went in from my fears, I couldn't appreciate what I brought. My value was able to come in with my value. Not saying I'm above the organization, I'm better than the organization, but it matters. But because also too, again, going by negotiation, a lot of times when we work, a lot of organizations, they want to own your intellectual property, except depends on how you come into the organization. I came in at a point again, same thing like what you in hip hop, right? Yeah. Selling CDs out my trunk. Yeah. Me working out my trunk created enough cachet where my negotiations
were different,
stronger. Versus if I didn't have none of that, put me in a different box, because the system, the bureaucracy is what the bureaucracy is. Are there ways to maneuver around it? Absolutely. but it's years of working, but also understood who I was and what I was and what I represented, and being humble in that dynamic, and then the value of the missing piece. But I mean, like, what's the group? Linda Campbell, and then what's the name of her group?
Oh,
People's Platform. So they did it. That book they did, right? The People's Atlas. I had participated in the video interviews a long time before they decided to convert it into a book. So they came back to all of us and said, we're gonna convert this into a book. By that time, I had already written and published 3 books, so I'm familiar with intellectual property, all those things. So they give me a contract. I'm going to do it because I believe in it. But then you give me a generic, basic contract that say I own this, I own that. No, we're gonna change this language to be more people oriented. And some, again, because we don't know our worth, we don't feel like we can't do that. Also, we feel as a poor, oppressed person, we've been conditioned to see us less than. That doesn't make us less. There's actually power in there. But we have to, like Fred Hampton talks about, Fred Hampton Jr., there's shame that comes with being oppressed. And I think we all could say, we look at ourselves, have wore that shame at some point, right? Mm-hmm. And once we can able to cleanse ourselves of that, we can see our strengths, despite whatever our circumstances is. And and then we look at our households and our history, that strength, that beauty was always there. Our mama, our grandmothers, our grandfathers holding down against whatever obstacle. So if we can take that into our negotiations, it puts us in a greater space. Because also we have to be, again, if you can't set my terms in, so be it. But that's the problem. Because of our oppression, we feel like we got to take every deal. And like I had to learn. I mean, like when somebody said, "Well, I'm gonna give you $10,000. I'm gonna get right now, Yusef. You can get a check, or you can get cash, or I can give you a contact list that's worth $100,000." Most of us gonna take the $10,000.
Yes.
Right then, because we want cash on hand. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna take the $100,000 list. I know it requires a lot of work, but what my work has taught me, there may be somebody on that list that can introduce me to $1 million. I'm not chasing it. I know my worth. And my worth comes out of communication, out of relationships, because once that 10,000 gone, it's gone. Yeah. But you could build a relationship with someone that's worth more than $10,000.
State of Black Detroit 2022 is brought to you by Detroit is Different. You can support Detroit is Different by liking, subscribing, and following Detroit is Different, the website, Facebook page, Instagram page. And also, remember, you can always give to Detroit is Different at Cash App, at Detroit is Different at the cash tag, and through PayPal.